Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. So my name is Hélène HUYNTHI. I am the director of the Economic Assessment and Policy Dialogue Department. And I welcome you to this webinar, new series of research conversation dealing today with the inequality and environmental changes in the Mekong region. So we will have 1 hour and a half together, and I will let right now the floor to our special advisor to the CEO and forthcoming regional director for Southeast Asia for the introduction, and I will retake the floor afterwards. So Jean-Pierre Marcelli, the floor is yours for the introduction.
Thank you so much, Hélène, and good morning to all. Thank you so much for your invitation for this very important subject for us and for the CEO. Just quite quickly, the net zero commitments made by the countries of the Southeast Asian region and support proposal being prepared at this very moment within the framework of the G7 for a certain number of them with the JP programs, so-called JP programs, open up a whole new field of strategic questions. How to reconcile development and drastic reduction of emissions, but also more broadly, reduction of impacts on the environment. The Mekong region, indeed, one of the most economically dynamic in the world, exemplify this dilemma, this world dilemma we have at this stage. How can we ensure an equitable distribution of efforts or even social policies that incorporates climate and environmental dimension in a world? What fair transition, public policies for a region that officially has a low level of social protection? Finally, what forms of co-opetition, cooperation, competition could be established and institutionalized around just transition issues between the states of the region, sharing a number of common characteristics, starting with a close ecosystem, similar dependencies on carbon resources, and shared systemic river and relatively similar economic dynamics. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Prayooth Yaowakhan, ecosystem and wetland specialist of the Mekong River Commission. Thank you. As a discussant of the book. The collective work presented today was financed thanks to the European Facility on Inequalities and trusted to the AFD in partnership with the ERD and the One ASEA project. It thus reflects shared desire and concern on the part of France and the European Union to support countries in the region in implementing ambitious transition strategy that fully include social issues. But AFD is already pragmatically, concretely acting in this direction with operation in the region with examples such as an irrigated project in Laos PTR to improve the resilience of the population to the effect of climate change while reducing at the same time poverty and increasing food security in the country. Also, the adoption of an integrated landscape approach, again in Laos, to help forest conservation and their sustainable management by the local communities. In Vietnam, a project to fight coastal erosion in Cà Mau province, where the objective is to improve the resilience of Cà Mau province to natural disaster and climate change, and to contribute to the sustainable economic development of this province. EU funds will be mobilized again in this project. Other project with the 3 provinces in Vietnam, Ninh Binh, A Tinh, and Can Thao, to secure the economy of the provinces, improve the health conditions of the population in the target areas, and also strengthen the management capacity of public bodies. A water resource management and agroecological transition program in irrigated area in Cambodia to reduce now the poverty of rural population, support the contribution of the agricultural sector to the economy, and reduce the country's vulnerability to climate change. At the regional level this time, AFD financed a conservation and green growth project in the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot to ensure the security of the greater Mekong subregion, GMS, forests and biodiversity, and assist rural population in sustainably management the nature resources. I will now hand over to Hélène HUYNH THI PHUONG, the director of AFD Research Department, who will present the challenges of this type of strategic collaboration at the regional level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. So, as you said, so this study is part of the International Research Program on Inequality funded by the European Commission, which has investigated the inequality dynamics in more than 35 countries through 22 studies with 3 markers. So the first one is that inequalities are assessed under a multidimensional approach. The second is that the research is undertaken with local researcher teams. And third, the research aims at feeding a policy dialogue with partner countries, or at least highlighting some policy recommendation. And this is exactly in this spirit that this study has been undertaken in the Mekong region. So this study has gathered almost 20 international and local authors coming from different expertise fields and contributing to a multidisciplinary approach to assess a multidimensional equity natural environment nexus. So this study has many academic and policy contributions. First, it tackled in an integrated approach the issues of equity and environmental change under the science of sustainability principle. The study has realized a systematic mapping of documented relationships between equity and natural environment factors in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, which is an analysis of thousands of publications over 40 years. So this will be presented in the first part of the presentation by Dr. Linh HUYNH. Third, the research program has undertaken 6 local case studies in the Mekong countries investigating the equity, justice, natural resources condition nexus at a very disaggregated geographical, gender, linguistic, and ethnic lenses, contributing to shaping impactful policy recommendation. Generally, those studies are undertaken at the national level. This one has undertook a very fine local analysis. So this presentation will be made by distinguished guests. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Linh HUYNH THI PHUONG. So she will be presenting the mapping. Linh HUYNH is a research associate at the French Research Institute for Sustainable Development based in Hanoi. She is a specialist of anthropology and sociology approach in land and water management. We'll have the pleasure to hear also of Alexis DROGOUL. He is the Director of Research at the French Research Institute for Sustainable Development. He designs models for environmental decision support and adaptation to climate change with a strong focus of Southeast Asia. He spent many years in Asia as a ERD representative for Vietnam and Philippines. We will hear also Etienne ESPAGNE, who is a senior economist at the AFD. He develops and contributes to a research program on the modelization and evaluation of climate damages, adaptation and mitigation strategies in developing and emerging countries, especially in Vietnam. And finally, Stéphane LAGRÉE, who holds a PhD in tropical geography and who is an associated researcher at the French Research Institute for Sustainable Development. And it has been working for more than 20 years in social science research, development and capacity building, especially in Southeast Asia as well. So you see that the ERD is really our strong partner in this study. Then we will have 3 discussants for this study after the presentation. So we are pleased to welcome Dr. Prayooth Yaowakhan, who is an ecosystem and wetland specialist at the Environmental Management Division from the Mekong River Commission Secretariat, sorry. Then we will have Dr. Marco Haenssgen, a sustainable development researcher in the Regional Center for Social Science and Sustainable Development at the University of Thailand. And finally, Benjamin Buclet, who is a development socio-economist and heading the Center for Research and Expertise on Education and Development in Bordeaux. I'm stopping here, I'm losing my voice, and now I'm giving the floor to Dr. Linh HUYNH THI PHUONG for presenting the mapping. Thank you. So no, just 1 minute. Sorry. So for the participants, you have you can add your question in the chat, and we will take the question at the end of the session. We will have normally 30 minutes for answering questions, and don't hesitate to put your question in the chat. Thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah, thank you very much for your nice introduction. So without further delay, so I will be starting to talk about the first part of the book, and then our editor of the book will be trying to give the brief introductions of the book. And we would like to inform you that some of our authors also present today in the session. So further discussions on the topic will be available later. So this will be the cover of the book that has been published with AFD. And so the first part of the book, we giving the result of the systematic mapping. So it's mapping the existing literature about the topic of relation between inequality and environmental change in the 5 countries in the Mekong regions. So this review of this mapping, to be exact, that it took place about 14 months, ended in 2021. And we're looking at not only scientific data, but also real literature. So report from institutional websites, as well as some other report. And we applying the methods of systematic review to make sure that we having the good database that with really exhaustive, and also trying to be as much as possible of comprehensiveness. So we also look at the dual relation between environment and inequality, because it's not only one way of the environmental change, it impacting different group of people, but also inequality embedded in the society, also creating some problem into the environmental changes. So this is the summary of what we have done in terms of data collections and data screening. So by support from a team in 5 different countries like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar, we collected 18,000 article, book, chapter, reports. And when we checked with the publication, we had 14,000. And after title, abstract, and full text screening, we ended up with 3,335 items to enter the analysis of the mapping, that going into detail to see the relation between environment and inequality in those documents. So I'm giving you only some reason that from our mapping. So we collected study from 1961 until 2020. And those 2,335 that actually having those articles published from the 1978 until 2020. And the majority of them actually in journal articles. And we also have thesis, report, and book sections. There are, of course, limitations in our work because there's some full text is not available, and also relating to the time constraint that we could not really go after those publications. So 674 item was actually excluded because of unavailability. So in general, we actually seeing the booming, like the booming of publications over time, especially if we look at the decade of 2001, 2010. it is when the topic is actually being talked a lot about, like how different environmental changes being actually influencing the livelihood of different group of peoples. And in this period of time, we actually looking at how in Vietnam and Thailand, the data production, knowledge production is being booming, like more than other countries like Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. But also the evolutions of knowledge production also increase in those other countries, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, in the later decades, like 2010s and 2015 later on. When we look at the topic itself, this exercise was done by voice viewer, actually looking at the keyword in the abstract. And actually it giving us three dominant themes in our database. So the first and the biggest one, actually, it looking at the different conflict relating to land right, to natural resource right, like water right, to different group of people, like how different reform and the change in policies and in environment in the last decade that actually affecting different group of peoples. And the tenure and the land right, and some of them would be highlighted really strongly and in our database on like forest degradations and land allocation and acquisition actually. And the second topic actually pop up is the climate change and different manifestations of vulnerability to the environmental changes, to flood, to disaster issue as well. And the last one actually about exposure to health risk, to pesticide issue, to pollution in different countries. So by this idea, we actually going in depth to see with this table. So on the left-hand side, you will see the different type of environmental changes. It could be a policy like the National Park or Protected Area. It could be a project hydropower, or it could be climate change, pesticide issues, pollution issue, disaster, or mining. And then how different group of people are being affected. So the darker color you see here would mean the majority of the publication is talking about that topic. So the less availability on that various topic, meaning that there is a need in research or like further exploration in that topic, or even there's something that only pop up in the last decade. For example, the issue of gender, or linking and or the research about different group with a urban area, or some of the not conventional target group for poverty or vulnerability study, which is the elite people. For example, linking to tsunami, like because we always talking about the poor group, and somehow that elite people probably is being affected by tsunami and they are not getting the help that they need. So just some of example like that. And the second table we're showing here is actually talking about different aspects of inequality. So it could be well-being, the migrations, it could be the influence, the impact, but also the adaptation type. Conflict and right that mainly related to the issue of land right, tenure right, water rights, and different other aspects. And we have the gender aspect and the risk and capacity. And the same as in the previous table that you could see that the darker color meaning more research on that topic, on that relations, and the lighter color meaning we would want to have more research into that topic and to understand why it's not yet available. Just to quickly to give you an idea on like the result of our mapping. Our mapping is just the starting point and the foundation for further research and further discussion. So to state again that the research on environment that link to fisher, seafarer, migrant, refugee, gender issues, and other non-traditional route of research, they are actually needed. And the urban and the peri-urban poor are the focus in the recent year, and also more work is really needed. And when we have that conclusion, we also have some light recommendation to the policy to talk about research and policy discussions on the impact and the alternative strategy for environment and resource governance are urgently needed. And it should take into account the inequality that currently embedded in the society and acknowledge the change in the livelihood that the community needed. And those keywords, as we mentioned here, inequality, inequity, and sometimes injustice, are actually new in the knowledge production. And a limited number of research are directly mentioned and work on the matter. So more research into the topic and also to communicate about the idea of those terminology also important.
Thanks.
So that would be, yeah, sorry.
No, please go on. Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly. So now we are going into the second part of the book. It's about a case study. So as mentioned by our moderators, that we have the contribution from different scholars. And again and again, we would like to say thanks to the contributor and for your contribution and patience to make this book happen. So we have different scholars from different university in Australia, in Canada, in France, in Thailand, and also in Vietnam as well. So now we get to start. I will be doing a brief introduction about the first case study, and then our editor will continue. So the first case study, we are talking about the case study on in the north of Thailand, and talking about flood and as the environmental risk. And the title is say social identity and unequal vulnerability in the structural transition to community-based flood risk governance in the Yom River Basin of Thailand. And it's done by a group of scholars from Australian National University, leading by Dr. Phao Thai Singapore. So this study is actually apply the participatory approach to work on the pilot study about community-based flood governance, actually talking about flood water detention. And in this research, they actually doing different in-depth interview to understand like how different social groups experience differently about vulnerability to group, but also like how they adapt into the new changes, including that pilot project of flood detentions. So part of the analysis actually highlight the higher vulnerability and the barrier to adaptation of a group of rural farmers, workers, elderly, and those physically exposed citizens in living with floods. So that would be the first case study. So I'm giving the floor now to our colleague to continue.
Thank you, Linh. So I'll say a word about the second case study entitled Displaced Sands, Displaced People, the Livelihood Impacts of Sand Mining. So this case study has been co-authored by Melissa Marschke, Jean-François Rousseau, Laura Beckwith, and Lucas van Aragon. And the authors investigate the lives of sand miners in and around Phnom Penh in Cambodia. And at the same time, they also look at how urban farmers are impacted themselves by the sand infill of urban wetlands. So in the chapter, you will find a marked and beautiful taste for detailed sociological portraits of these different livelihoods. And the authors managed to connect two apparently disconnected worlds that are in fact very much tied through this circular causalities of the sand use and outputs around Phnom Penh. So sand in this case is a vital ingredient for the fast and also unequal urban development process of Phnom Penh. But sand mining also creates temporary livelihoods with some positive social impacts for some social groups. But at the same time, it also slowly destroys the livelihoods of others by modifying the ecosystem and the landscape for farmers. So with this very specific angle of the question of sand around a booming city of Cambodia, of the Mekong region, we have a very an extremely nice example of the common dynamics between environmental changes on the one side and social inequalities on the others. And I hand over the floor to the next one.
Stéphane.
Okay, so now a few words about the chapter 2.3, which is talking about social justice and mining exploitation in Laos. This objective of our Canadian colleague Eric Motet and Frédéric Lasserre aim at understanding the ambiguities and limits of local people's involvement in mining projects in Laos. In this country, mining sector has the potential to play an important role in developing the national's economy and achieving social justice. However, mining can bring significant environmental and social consequences, and some of which can already be observed. For example, mining is linked to social problems stemming from a lack of cooperation with local communities, environmental degradation, and third, an increased pressure on water resource. In the case study, the authors show that mining has made it possible to open up the peripheral region that was previously difficult to access and is now connected by road to the rest of the country. Conversely, the authors underline the negative effects of the exploitation on the environment, but also on the willingness of certain ethnic groups to stay away from the national development scheme decided by the central government. In conclusion, in the study, if the study shows that people directly impacted by extractive activity are rather favorable to mining operations due to the benefits they bring, as employment opportunities and additional sources of income, in the most remote areas, communication with local people is more difficult and is generally impaired by the mine executives' lack of knowledge. The perception of the mine project is consequently tainted with great mistrust. In other words, a form of partial social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. Alexis?
Yes. So there is still some echo, but it's okay now. So I will talk about the article, which is called Customary Land Tenure Under Development, the Impact of the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor on the town tea farming communities in northern Myanmar. So this article, which has been written by Stephen Yen Han Thun, a former director of the Tea Land Research Center in Myanmar and a socio-political analyst, anthropologist, and humanitarian worker, is probably, I would say, the most activist of the articles, or the most militant of the articles we agreed to publish in this book. It is an article which details research conducted in December 2018 and January 2019. Thus, prior to the military coup that saw the Tatmadaw, the official name of the Burmese armed forces, overthrow civilian rule in Myanmar. And as such, it is a kind of interesting and invaluable record
from the Secretariat side, we cannot hear you, your presentation.
Please, some mics are open. Could you please close up your mic? Thank you.
Okay, it's all right. Yeah, so as I was saying, actually, this paper has been written just prior to the military coup in Myanmar, and it is a kind of invaluable record of how these armed forces, after years of military dictatorship and under a civilian government, were effectively leading the way in terms of how can I say, large-scale land-based investments, such as the one depicted in this paper, called the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, a vast set of infrastructure, part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, so composed especially of large and long gas and oil pipelines. And as we understand in the paper, actually, the threat to the environment and the rise of inequalities in indigenous populations go together and actually increase together because these investments supported by the military have two consequences. On the one hand, the occupation and destruction without any real impact assessments of plots rich in biodiversity. And second, the eviction without any real compensation of customary land users, including the Haenssgen tea society, whose voices have been completely ignored in the process, posing serious threats actually to the customary land tenure system and the livelihoods of these people. So for us, because it is based on participant observation methods, this paper has the merit to demonstrate that activism and scientific research are not completely antagonistic when rigorous scientific methods can be used. So thank you, and I let the floor to the next one.
Thank you, Alexis. Stéphane.
Stéphane, the sound we can't hear you.
No, I saw Daniel Ewar in the list of participants, so I say hello to him, and I hope I will stay online about the short summary I did. So yeah, Daniel Ewar raised 4 questions at the beginning of the paper about first the way the geographical production system changed in the recent year. Second, polluting maize production technique. Third, the impacts of maize production upon local producer or smallholder. And last question, in link with corporate leaders. The paper claims that by reaching out new markets to the geographical periphery of Thailand, multinational companies monopolize their profits, protect their image, while the disproportionate burden of risk in environmental and financial terms is placed on the smallholder, exacerbating economic, social, and environmental inequalities. In the conclusion, Daniel Ewar confirms that the power of the value chain in the processing of animal feed, coupling with expansion to new markets, allow multinationals to spread financial risk and open up further avenues to generate capital. On the other hand, farmers have to carry the burden of localized risk, being confronted with the precarity of debt, environmental pollution, and soil degradation, paying the cost of price decreases and low output or polluting production methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. I will finish if you can get your sound. Thank you. So the last but not least of these case studies entitled Rural Urban Migration and Environmental Change, Vulnerability Nexus from the Vietnamese Mekong Delta to Ho Chi Minh City, has been authored by Clara Julien, Ngo Thi Tu Chang, and Gwen Puliat. And these three authors investigate the hidden environmental factors behind the economic factors influencing the decision to migrate from the Mekong Delta to Ho Chi Minh City. So indeed, this is a very important and timely topic related to the social and environmental dynamics of the Mekong Delta. Many scientists already have raised the alarm on sea level rise, salinity intrusion, land subsidence, and an increasing variability in precipitation regimes in the Mekong Delta. And usually they mention these important biophysical factors are as key threats for the livelihoods in the Delta and key reasons for migration decisions. But actually, with this study, what the authors find is that most migration decisions seem to be taken for mainly economic reasons, not exactly directly linked to environmental stresses. So paradoxically, when people leave the Mekong Delta, an area which is affected by heavy biophysical constraints, these economic migrants enter a place, Ho Chi Minh City, where the economic constraints become predominant through the cost of daily expenses, the costs of housing, and the risk of social marginalization and isolation, etc., and also limited access to social public services. So all in all, it's what the authors show, I think, is the complexity of the migration decision, where the direct decision is taken mainly for economic reason, but where you can find behind these economic reasons sometimes, and more often with the recent climate trends and environmental trends of the Delta, you can find some more hidden environmental factors. I think it illustrates very well the complexity of this environmental inequality nexus for the specific case of one of the most important delta in Southeast Asia. So that's the final case study, and I hand over the floor to Stéphane for a conclusion.
Still muted.
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's not really a conclusion, but we built this two slides just to summarize what you just learned about the 6 case studies. And I will maybe underline the diversity and the complementarity of these study cases in terms of not only geographic localization in the country, but also the relationship between rural and urban situation, lowland and highland, but also the diversity of the different approaches. We are talking here about socio-anthropology, economy, geography, political ecology approach, also, as you can see in this slide, but also in this one. It's also, for the last study, review of the literature in the Mekong Delta. And the target is not, for sure, is not the same. There's a different game of actors in this 6 study case who think make the book quite high, with high interesting for the lecturer. But much more interesting, I think, is, and it could be as a conclusion, what I want to say is it's the whole project we developed during 2.5 years, the Inequality and Environmental Change Nexus. This research project is based, and I think it's very important, and sometimes we forget that, is based on the broad institutional synergy. Initially with the European Erasmus Plus project, WANASI, with a partnership of 15 European and ASEAN universities, but also thanks to an opening of the cooperation with new academic structure and university staff from the Mekong country. Behind the research of the systematic map, we have 15, 20 staff we collaborate with during 1 year, more than 1 year, and he makes the book really, even if they are not here with us today. And I think this institutional synergy must be seen as a strategy to place knowledge at the heart of public policy. This is the first important point from my side. The second one maybe is that this mapping represents a particularly innovative project. This is the first research on the link between inequalities and environmental changes at the scale of the Mekong countries. And we have to underline that. The results show that research and policy discussion on the impacts and alternative strategy for environmental and resources governance are urgently needed. And we hope that these results will serve as the basis for launching a broad research and capacity building program around the sustainability science. And maybe we will talk about this point with the discutant and the audience in the next coming minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Please, I have the microphone. Yeah, it's okay. And yes, as you mentioned, this studies is very rich, and I would like to highlight the methodology. All the case studies almost have been done through field research, so it's very precise with contact with local population. So it's really an original contribution, and thanks for that. I turn now to the discussants. Sorry, so I will represent them because I was almost coughing when I first did it. So first we will have Dr. Prayooth Yaowakhan, ecosystem and wetland specialist at the Environmental Management Division at the Mekong River Commission Secretariat. So please, Mr. Dr. Yaowakhan, the floor is yours. And we don't hear you. I think we have lost the connection with Dr. Prayooth Yaowakhan. So what I suggest is that we start by the second discussant, and we will come back to Mr. Yaowakhan afterwards. So I will give the floor to Dr. Marco Haenssgen, who is a sustainable development researcher in the Regional Center for Social Science and Sustainable Development at Chiang Mai University, Thailand. So Dr. Haenssgen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hélène. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak here at this forum, which is very exciting. And as a matter of fact, it was also quite a privilege to read this book and see the diversity of authors engage with global priority topics so constructively and effectively, as a matter of fact. What I'm going to do in this brief review is give you an overview of my reading of the book, which, to put a punchline up front, is an amazing and impressive volume. But then I also, based on my background in global sustainable development, situate the work in the broader scholarship and consider where in the intellectual trajectory and the intellectual agenda on global sustainable development does this book fit, and where do we go from here, given now the important work that the authors have done. So as I mentioned, and starting with an overview, the book addresses this intersection between developing inequality and environmental transitions. And that is a global priority topic, right? So like in the global development agenda, this is what's going to dominate, whether we want it or not, policy, practice, research for the next 20, 30, 40 decades. So the book is very forward-looking in that sense, as it really, really effectively provides a foundation, an anchor for the work that's going to come. Right? It has effectively reviewed many, many years of research. It has effectively integrated grounded case studies. And this will help us sort of like build a foundation for future work. So there's no doubt about the relevance and importance of the work that the authors have engaged in. The approach of the book is also very effective in that it is very, very effectively literature-based, as Linh had presented to us, the literature map. This provides a really effective backdrop, and a more effective backdrop than usual in other volumes for the case studies, given that now we have a really good sense and intellectual comfort that the kind of topics that we're engaging in are not just arbitrarily selected, but actually work out against a really important backdrop that the literature has further and further developed. And here, especially from my point of view, this emphasis on recognition and inequalities in the three-pronged conceptualization of inequality is really important, is something that at least the past works had not so effectively pointed out, and something that comes back again and again and again in the region as a problem. But people, authors as well as policymakers, used to struggle finding a language for this phenomenon that we're observing. So this integration of recognition and inequalities into the conversation that we have about inequalities in the region, I think, is really important. The mapping that is featured in the book is also something that AFD and IRD had published earlier. So for some readers, that's perhaps something that feels somewhat familiar. However, it is useful to have here in this volume. And again, it provides the useful backdrop insofar as that we see that issues of vulnerability and marginalization are not just a fad, it's something that the literature has increasingly picked up. And so this literature map is a really, really substantive pillar to guide future work. And then on top of that, the empirical study case studies, which are really nicely diverse, they bring the conceptual arguments of inequality and of this evolving link between development and environmental change really nicely to life. And here we are not only looking at this theme of interrelatedness and the broader theme of the book itself, but also they nicely tease out the problematic tensions and contradictions that we continue to see in global development agendas. And that's why I think this book is so critical to moving the agenda forward as something that speaks to global development priorities, repeatedly recognizing that neoliberal forms of development, that even neoliberal forms of conservation and reactive policy initiatives that sometimes border on greenwashing, they have really, really significant limitations, and we start making these more visible. So in this sense, the book makes a very important contribution. So that's the broader overview. In relation to other works that had been published recently, such as Agantanoglous and Killen's book on time, climate change, global racial capitalism, and decolonial planetary ecologies, Benassi and their colleagues' books on climate conflict displacement, or Kogan and Chen's book on sacred forests of Asia. The book is, of course, in good company, and I also paste these books here in the chat in case other people are interested in following up on that. Let me send it here. So the book is in good company, but I think, again, the extent to which I will paste this later. The extent to which here the authors and editors engage with the scholarship and also reflect and recognize the regional connectedness of the issues that they're exploring. I think that makes this volume stand out compared to its competitors, if we want to call them that. But there's also some thoughts and suggestions that we can take forward. For the systematic mapping, this is, of course, an impressive exercise, and I do in no way want to diminish the work that had gone in. Going forward, because there's likely to be more work that can be done with it in future work, what we can do is, as we have these very different topics that are being that have been captured in the literature map, we would also benefit from understanding and mapping the systems, the very diverse systems across countries, within countries, where these issues play out. So where and how does conflict come up? Where and how do gender issues come up, and in what constellation? This can be a next stage of systematic mapping and that we compare and understand the systems so that we can also derive lessons directly from the scholarly work that had been done. Secondly, we can also benefit from amending the literature map with methodological information, but also in light of the framework that we have here, the different dimensions of inequality that are activated in each kind of research, or that each piece of research is problematizing. We have disciplinary information already, so like that's useful, but often within disciplines, individual scholars have different approaches on how to arrive at a particular topic, and that then limits or shapes at least the amount of information that we can extract from that. So if it turns out, for instance, that all the work in the field is quantitative, then we might also want to embark on more qualitative research, participatory research. And thirdly, I think another further development of the literature map can be a more closed-ended theoretical framework that gives us a clearer sense of the pathways from environmental change, from development to these different inequalities, along which we can then map these theory contributions. Again, for scholarship, this can then be helpful to understand what are the links concretely that we still need to continue to inform. But that's on top of the good work that has been done here. The cases themselves also trace very nicely the historical causes of this evolving relation between development and inequality, like ethnic discrimination, like political evolution. And they also highlight the problematic discourse and biases in economic growth that still continue to dominate the region here. It would be nice to see a further development of the cases in terms of translation into the frameworks that the book is posing. Stéphane has done this in the overview table that we have just seen as a first step, but more systematic comparison here can be really useful to understand, again, like the systems, the constellation of stakeholders that produces these particular forms of inequalities, and given the diversity of cases that we have with very different policy implications. This will then enable us also to see more concretely under which conditions and in which forms of evolutions of development and environmental change can we then consider potentially routes to policy action. Also, what would be nice to see in future work would then also be a stronger emphasis on affective dimensions, emotional dimensions, and the emotional environment that affected populations have to deal with. The multiple and also the especially non-material dimensions of livelihood, so symbolic forms of livelihood, social survival, cultural survival, but then also people's engagement with heritage and their own culture in these transitions. So these are themes that I would see quite usefully developing out of this work here, because they again have very important implications on how we think about policy, how we think about communities' agency in contributing to their own human security, in contesting the state, in participating in policy initiatives. So all in all, when coming to an end here, this is an impressive volume. So hands down, this is great work. It's an important reference point. It will be an important reference point in a critical juncture of global development research. The regional focus that we're looking at here is substantiated through really nicely diverse case studies that are quite capable of revealing these local, environmental, regional interconnections that a site-specific analysis that's focused on one specific area would often struggle with. And so, like, this is really good. We need this book, right? But the book in and of itself also cannot and is not an end product. So it's an interim product. We need to move on from here as well, right? So, like, we have here an important reference point. But as we go forward, how do we build on the recommendations that the book is making, which are sensible, but still need to be more concrete as we evolve our own thinking on the subject? So, for instance, the development of sustainability sciences in Southeast Asia in particular is absolutely important, but how concretely do we do that? And might we want to, for instance, develop teaching case studies based on the work that the authors have done here in order to infuse concretely the next generation of sustainability thinkers? We also benefit from thinking about the systems, as I mentioned, in which these relationships play out. So mapping them systematically, and then thinking about the constellation of stakeholders in a stakeholder analysis kind of research type. That's something that, for instance, more policy-oriented researchers might be very interested in doing. This can then help us understand how can we concretely devise strategies in a specific setting that might be local, that might be regional, in order to mobilize and demobilize well-wishing and hostile actors that might be in the way of achieving sustainability, that might be in the way of achieving this three-pronged form of equity that the book is problematizing. And I think I'll leave it with that. But overall, a fantastic volume, and I feel very privileged to have had the chance to read this book in depth, to also then share my ideas here with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your appreciation and your suggestion for the ways forward. And I will give the floor at the end to the editors to have a chance to answer all the discussant comments. But now I would like to give the chance to Dr. Prayooth Yaowakhan to take the floor if he can. Yes, I think it's possible. So, Dr. Yaowakhan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Do you hear us clearly?
Yes, absolutely.
Hello? Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the book, which is great and successful for your hard job to develop it. And I already scanned through the book, but not in the detail that I saw that the case study for the all 6 case study is focused on the inequality about the land ownership, about the land development. And I think that is the most concerning issue now in all the lower Mekong River Basin region. Even though in the MRC Secretariat, we also focus on this kind of the same issue. Especially in our division, which is focused about the watershed and wetland, we found the encroachment issue is a big concern issue and can change the natural watershed and wetlands area into the man-made wetlands and watershed areas. But what I don't see in the book is about the focus about the gender component in the book. We see that you focus about the inequality for the local communities and local people, which is we are now focused at the same direction. For the MRCs, now we have the State of Basin report, which we provide the key summary of the change and the status of the entire lower Mekong River Basin, including the livelihood and the local community which have been impacted by the water-related infrastructure development project in the lower Mekong Basin. And to complete that, we already have the Mekong River Basin indicator frameworks, which has a 3-level 15 strategic indicator, 53 assessment indicator, and 183 monitoring parameter, which we use time to collect the monitoring parameter to calculate the indicator and then report in every 5 years to see the status and trends and change of the 5 dimensions, including the climate change, the economics, the social, the environment, and also the corporate in the Mekong River Basin. And also, as a secretariat, as a regional component, we try to develop the bottom-up approach to let the participatory approach from the local community in voice on the concerned issues. We already successful in the one project which has been supported by the KfW Development Bank about the watershed area. That we set up the pilot project in one area in Laos PR to have the participatory land use and water planning from the local community, and then we are now developing the upscaling the framework for watershed governance and management, as well as the strategy for the basin-wide management for environmental assets with regional importance. This is another next step, which we adopt the lesson learned from that watershed project. We developed the strategy for the basin-wide perspective to protect and manage of all the key environmental assets in the lower Mekong River Basin. The main approach to do that, we use the bottom-up approach to let the local community and local people have the voice, what they want to do with their own key habitat that they are daily routine depending on. Now we come up with the start from the first phase, which will be 12 sites in the lower Mekong Basin, and now we have set up the project-based action plan in each site already. We think that with this approach, we can see how to solve the local based problem or issue which we are now really concerned, and some of key issues that has reflected in this book has already been discussed between the 4 member countries already in our series of the national and regional consultation and expert group meeting. I think this book is like to reflect the current change and about the inequality issue, which is good. But it would be good if the next step of this book can incorporate some of the MRC works as a part, as the next step of how the Mekong region, how the Secretariat office respond to the inequality issues that we already encounter as the current condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yaowakhan. I'm pleased to see that this book is converging and putting some feeding in your action, and it's very welcome. And finally, I will give the floor to Benjamin Buclet for the first discussion. So Benjamin is a development socio-economist, and he has created the Center for Research and Expertise on Education and Development with a strong focus on Southeast Asia. Benjamin, the floor is yours. We don't hear you. You are muted.
All right, sorry. Yes, thank you, Hélène. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, of course, I would like to congratulate the authors and the editors. Obviously, we saw through the presentations that it has been a lot of work. It is very, very interesting to link the literature review and case study, I think. And I think it is interesting for 2 reasons. The first one is that some elements struck me when I listened to Linh presentation of the literature review, and it's most of all the relatively few references about environmental inequality, the names, the terms in environmental inequality, inequity, and injustice. So of course, Linh, you called for more production, more scientific production focused on these themes, and I think you're absolutely right. But I have a first question on that. I'd like to know, why do you think these terms are not very much found in the literature. And it leads me to another question, which you probably already listened many times, received many times, is about China, of course. What would it be, this literature review, if you had added China in the scope of the study? I would like to know if you have some hypothesis about that. So I think the literature review is interesting in this sense, and in the situation about the case studies, even if I would really need to read them carefully to have a more accurate comments about them, I noticed that they are most all of them examples, illustrations that human interactions are at the center of this nexus between inequalities and environmental issues. We saw, of course, a lot of economic activities, mining exploitations, agriculture. We even talked about connections between people and sand, which I found quite interesting. And it leads me to this idea that basically this human side of the book, this human side of the issue of the connection between inequalities and environmental issues is probably central on the way we can think, and here I can echo what Marco and what Mr. Prayooth said about what will we do with so much knowledge you've produced here. What are the next steps? In your conclusion, Linh, you called for direct discussions about environmental inequalities on both research and governance arena. I understand governance arena like the processes of how decisions are made. So basically, I interpret what you said or wrote at least as a call for a stronger linkage between research field and decision makers, or at least decision-making processes. And here I have one more question and one proposal. The question is how all of you who have worked on these case studies and on the literature review, most of all on the case studies, how do you think we could strengthen these links between research arena and decision-making processes? So that's the question. And then the proposal is about an initiative we've been working on. We, when I say we, I'm talking about the people involved in the Wanasi project Stéphane mentioned earlier, and also involved in these publications, and trying to work on these questions of how to strengthen these links between research and decision-making processes. We worked on the creation of an alliance of universities and research institutions in Southeast Asia and in Europe. And we are currently trying to develop or to give body to this alliance based on the idea of a connected research. And if I may, I could share just one image to exemplify the proposal. And yes, it works. Fantastic. So this concept of connected research is promoting a fair environmental transition based on, of course, of strong knowledge production in terms of volume, but also we will work on the way the problematics are defined through a connection to society and networking. The third wing is about communication and dissemination, how results of research are communicated, and most of all the form they take in order to reach decision makers, and capacity building effort also. So this is just an example and a proposal of how we could make research more directly related to society, to societal issues, to decision-making processes. But of course, it's open for discussion. And just to let you know that if you want to connect and to keep posted on this alliance, you can definitely ask Etienne, maybe, or Stéphane to give to give them your email address, and we'll keep you posted. So yeah, a few questions for you, and I'll leave you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very precise comments and strengthening the issue of liaising research to policy decision making. So I will maybe let the floor to the editors to have quick answers to the discussants. I don't know who want to start to answer with. Maybe Linh, you were the first to present. You want to start?
Yeah. Yeah, I will be quickly answering some questions, and I think the question about how we did not really present much of the topic on hydropower, especially in China, and Alexis already answered about some of that, and we want to clarify hydropower is actually pop up as one of the biggest collection of data in our database. And we, at the moment, because of constraints in capacity, we actually not including the work in China because it could make the collection too big at that moment for us to handle. So hydropower topic in our database, in our analysis, linking to how it affects the community just right after or at the hydropower place and at the downstream. It's mainly on hydropower project in Laos and Cambodia. So definitely it's an interesting topic to look at, especially about water diplomacy. I think that Mekong River Commission have also an interest in that topic as well. And the second question we have here about the collection in Laos, about research in Laos. Yes, we found that the number of research about our topic in Laos is quite limited. And we have two arguments in that. The first one would be the lack of capacity. And it's also linking, maybe later Stéphane would want to elaborate on how we could work for the future. Then the second argument would be about, it could be that the topic of environment inequality is not yet recognized strongly in Laos, given the fact that in our region, like within the 5 countries, we have Thailand and Vietnam, somehow having the stronger work, especially in the topic of sociology, political ecology. So that could be the reason for that. And I think before giving the floor to the other editor, I think Benjamin had the two questions. I think I would want to mention the terminology of inequality in equity interested. Why we would like to discuss much more in that and to make it more available. I think it could also a topic for further discussion and research. At the moment, I would say we think that the terminology may be not really easy to translate into the local language, and it's not yet the current research about the impact or different impact on different group of people and different group having a different vulnerabilities and disadvantaged group might not be linked directly to the idea of inequality or injustice. And to bring it up further, it could be an idea, but why it's not yet available and how we could do that, it could be a discussion. And the last point about the link between research and policy, thanks a lot for your proposal. And also I think that would be something that most of us have been kind of talking about, like to link between science and policy. And I think Alexis and Chen and Stefan could have like much more interesting work on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Linh. So I give the floor to maybe Stefan. You want to start to enter on the local studies, on the case studies? Sorry. You are muted, Stefan.
Oh, but not really come back to the case study, but come back to be online with what Marco and Benjamin Buclet explain. I mean, what can happen? What will be the next step? And also with Mr. Prayooth from MRC. We would like to use all the work we did around the systematic mapping to develop a research and a capacity building project around fair transition, environmental transition in the Mekong country. And we hope that this book and the systematic mapping will help us to develop a new strategy to involve not only researcher, but also the community, also politic staff around a new way to develop a research, to be more connected with maybe, if I can say, to be more connected with the reality of the field. And it's why we are, Benjamin and myself, in touch with University of Laval, Quebec, Canada, for the maybe a pilot project to develop this new strategy with two studies, one in Chiang Mai and one in Mekong Delta, about inequality and environmental change nexus, with a new way to make research involving new actors in the process. So I think it's quite important. We already write a quite important concept note about that, including different universities, because I think we have to put at the heart of the debate the university with some agency, bank, NGO, and put different actors in the same all around the table. And it's why this new strategy should be discussed in the workshop, formulating workshop. I hope in the before the end of this year to use the opportunity to start as soon as possible this new strategy around a fair transition.
Thank you. Alexis, Etienne, do you want to?
If Stefan cut his sound, yes, maybe. Okay, thank you, Stefan. Just to elaborate, I think that was said by the different discussants. So this is a first attempt. The systematic review is a huge work and gives us, I think, as much about what has been done on this environment inequality nexus as it says about what has not been done. So it's a kind of a programmatic book in a way already. And so the question, and it's natural that the discussion has evolved around what comes next. What comes next at this regional level in terms of research, but research that is applied, that digs deeper into specific policy recommendations, and that also let's say, nourishes a dialogue with the governments or regional organizations, such as the Mekong River Commission we have today around the table. So I think that's the key points. Of course, Benjamin and Stéphane have worked on this existing network of local universities. I think we have Christine Cabasset also from the IRASEC. So there are networks, of course, of researchers and IRD, of course, involved in the regions. But the key issue that maybe is lacking, and maybe that can be discussed now, is researchers, local researchers and foreign researchers working on this specific nexus, so that it can also address more immediate policy issues and nourish the reflection on development trajectories in the region. And furthermore, after COP26, all the countries in the region have engaged into net zero strategies, and if we take these announcements seriously, this means strong changes in the development pathways of the region. So how can this be addressed? This needs research, and this needs policy dialogue. So I just add this here.
Thank you, Etienne. Alexis, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, I can add a few words. It's difficult to speak after my three colleagues because they already said everything I wanted to say, and I thought was very original, but actually it was not. We have to remain quite humble and I saw it in the different questions here, actually, and what Etienne said is perfectly right. We just uncovered some specific nexuses and some specific links, or explicit links, actually, between environmental changes and social inequalities. But there are so many others to uncover, okay, and probably so many we don't really see right now, and for which specific researches are needed in the future if we want to, well, actually improve the livelihood of people in the region, and at the same time improve, for example, biodiversity or the protection of the environment. So for me, this pleads for something which is maybe not completely done in this book, which is moving from multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary researches. So when I say that, actually it's being able to equally speak about environmental changes and social inequalities. So not only taking one side to look at the other, but really being able to describe how things work, how they influence each other, how they interact with each other. And for that, we need experts in, let's say, geophysical phenomena, as well as social experts or social science experts. So it's something, it really, for me, it really pleads for this kind of research, and also maybe addressing the kind of difficulties that higher education systems in the region, but also in our countries, okay, like France, for example, have in training people in doing such interdisciplinary research. Okay. It's a real concern, and actually, for me, the book is really interesting in that aspect. If you look at the different chapters, if you look at the different work which has been reviewed, actually most of them are take one point of view. So social science point of view on such specific aspects, covering some aspects, of course, of environmental changes, but also maybe some biophysical aspects which incidentally have some social consequences. But the thing is that we really need to build more knowledge on and more interesting knowledge. And I believe, to finish, that building such knowledge would probably feed in a much more interesting way the development policies by allowing people to balance their social and biophysical interventions, and by allowing policymakers actually to maybe balance their interventions as well. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Alexis. There were a question also on how these results could be integrated and how this approach could be integrated in the AFD project. I think Jean-Pierre Marcelli has left, but and Etienne will be complementing. But what I would like to say is that this is really the challenge to looking forward, how to assess and to build a project with a holistic approach, integrating both the environmental and inequality aspects at the same level, and one not being superseded by the others. And typically, this kind of research helps a lot in identifying, making the diagnostic of what are the key points to look at. I think it's a lot of question of process. So basically, what we push at the AFD is that in the feasibility studies to integrate both environmental and inequality/equity approach. We've been pushing this at a project level, and when it is a policy dialogue and a policy, not a project, but a policy loan, for instance, it will deal a lot with dialogue. We will put the attention to the dialogue with not only the authorities, of course, but with the population. The question of the population is at the center of the studies. The social construct, the social contract will be key if we want to, in the long run, have this ecological transition, a fair ecological transition. And to start with, it means a lot of dialogue with the partners, with the stakeholders. I think it has been said by the discussant, the notion of stakeholder and more research on stakeholder assessment would be key. So now at the research department, more and more we are associated in the project team, precisely for undertaking these ahead studies, for having the diagnostic and for liaising what the research can tell with the project implementation to strengthen the impacts. But as Alexis mentioned, we need to remain humble because it's a very ambitious agenda, but we are completely dedicated to that for now at the research department, at least with a close link to the operational departments. I don't know if I will just have a look at the question. Yeah, Francesco tackled the notion on the impact of effectively of programs to be transformative. I don't know, Benjamin, you answered that, but it's a key question how to have the more impact issue on when we are training. So do you want to have a word on that? Benjamin, we don't hear you.
Oh, okay, I finally find the button. Yes, of course, it is a challenge. It is really complicated. But the interesting thing about the academy is that we are supposed to think, we are supposed to reflect on our practices also. And what we try to do here is some kind of reflexive initiative about how us researchers, how the institutions, how academic institutions and how research institutions should, and I'm saying should, not only could, but should transform their practices in order to better face the challenges that are posed to humanity, basically. I mean, I'm not exaggerating with that, but the idea here is to make it differently in order that the knowledge that is produced by all these brains working in the academy would be more accessible to resolve the everyday's life for regular citizen, but also, of course, to have an influence on decision makers. And it is not only challenging, it is really complicated, because, of course, the academy is not the only sector that is trying to influence decision makers. And we absolutely know how important are resources, human and financial resources, spent by large companies and corporations in order to lobby and influence decision making. And of course, the academy and the scientists don't have these resources. So basically, the challenge is probably here to find a way to mobilize. And what Alexis said is quite interesting about this case study, that activism and science are not necessarily antagonists. And I think if we can find a way to compete on the same level, it won't be with the same weapons. We have to find another way to put science and rationality on the forefront for decision making. But we can't use lawyers and marketing campaigns. So, if I can say, this is basically the only thing I can say. I have good, well, I have hopes that working through very targeted issues like inequalities and environmental changes in a specific region, you know, we could exemplify another way of doing research in order to better influence and can win this battle. But of course, it is challenging.
Thank you very much. And I think it will be the words of the hand. We're close to the end of the session, and so I would like to thank all the editors, all the discussants, but also all the authors which have been cited during this webinar. It has been recorded, so you will be able to watch it in replay. And I would like to thank the audience for remaining with us for this hour and a half. And I wish you good day, and I hope that we will be able to impact really the decision making at the AFD, and I think at the ERD we will remain committed to that looking forward. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you, Hélène, for a brilliant organization.
Thank you. Bye bye.